Today's webinar is a really, really interesting one, specifically because it's not about freight, which is always a kind of welcome change from our side. See, for the longest time, we've been thinking about where we can inject some interesting conversation into the general logistics technology ecosystem. We spend a lot of time thinking about the convergence of logistics and technology, where those two meet, and it's really complicated. It's complicated. And for me, the best reminder of this is when you go and, if you remember, get on board an airplane, right? When you get to the travel agent doing the ticketing, and it's always those old school blue screens with small text. And you realize that it's not that people aren't trying to push change, it's that it is really, really difficult to inject change into something that is constantly moving and has so much responsibility that it's very difficult to change. So new employees at airlines have to learn how to use those older school platforms in order to accommodate and make sure that things continue to work. And what today's webinar is really about is how we can recognize the centricity of a user, the importance of the user, how taking their needs and taking what they want to accomplish into account can help do that. Just a quick reminder about what WebCargo is. WebCargo is a member of the Freightos Group. It is a sales and pricing digitization platform for the cargo space with a strong focus on air cargo, but strong multimodal capabilities as well. We work with over 2,000 logistics providers around the world, 18,000 users, and I think we're going to talk a lot about users during the course of this webinar, rely on WebCargo on a nearly daily basis in order to do their work. And that really comes into one of these core challenges of how do you recognize that things are changing, how do you accommodate, and then how do you develop further? So as I said, it's all about the user. We could talk about us and we could talk about the companies that we work with, but if we don't recognize that the users are at the center of everything, they don't use us. And if they don't use us, then we don't succeed either. Now, I want to start at the ending here because there's no real reason to keep you in suspense. What we're talking about, and most of this webinar today will really focus on this screen that you see in front of you. Focuses on how we started at a platform that required a decent amount of work, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and how we shifted into a new platform that got a design patent by the European Union and really saw some major changes when it came to the actual performance. This is a platform for live pricing, live capacity assessment from airlines, and actual e-bookings. That's sample data there, of course. And you could see just from the percentage growth in e-bookings that we've had, digital bookings with airlines, it came at a fairly pivotal moment. And I definitely don't attribute the entire growth to this, even though our guest might, and she definitely would be fairly in the right to do so. But user centricity and the right design together with the right functionality can really do a lot. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about. The first thing that we're going to discuss a little bit is design principles. What are the design principles that we use at WebCargo in order to balance the needs of a very technical industry with some big shifts that are happening in the general ecosystem, and then how we recognize how that shapes the users. Talking a little bit about the internal design process that we used, or that the team used, not myself, I'm more of a talker, but that we used in order to put this together, the challenges, the analysis of the results and what ended up happening, and you already saw some of them, and then some of the lessons, I'm going to turn off my phone now, and some of the lessons that we came up with across the board that don't necessarily only relate to designers. Now, joining me today, I'm Ethan Buckman, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at the Freightos Group. And joining us today is the person who really led a huge part of this project, Cristina Sampaio, who is the product designer and runs user experience at WebCargo. Cristina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for hosting me, Eden. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, I mean, let's dive right in because, at the end of the day, we have a lot of users that regularly log into WebCargo and trust us in order to improve the way that they do pricing and booking, and I really don't want to make it about that. When you approach any design challenge, right, when you start at square one, what are the actual principles or processes that you take in order to make sure that you can provide the right user experience?
Okay, then so the way I see it, the main core principles in design are transversal, whether you're a software designer or you're an industrial designer, even if you're a signage designer, for example, right? So I guess that the goal at the end of the day is to somehow improve people's lives, or at least try to make them a little bit more simple, right? So I guess that some of us here today have already been in the circumstance where design failed us, right? So if you can go to the next screen, this can happen. This can happen in very different ways, right? You can just be shopping with your family in a shopping mall, and you just want to go to the bathroom, and all of a sudden, you see yourself lost from your family. You didn't find the bathroom, you're in the middle of somewhere in a 6th-floor shopping mall. Or it can happen in a completely different way, like you're super excited to install this new app you found about, and 2 minutes later it's uninstalled from your cell phone, and you feel really frustrated because it had nothing to do with your expectations. So in terms of consequences, these are real, and when it comes to business, bad design has huge consequences. So when we narrow it down to product design, and if you could take us to the next screen, the main core principles that I always try to keep in mind for myself are these three. So the first one would be the responsibility that we have as designers, because when we're designing a tool that is used by thousands of users, the impact you have is huge, right? And it can go one way or another. So you're designing for people that are making business with your tool, right? They are making business, they are solving problems every day. So they are trying to optimize their operations with your tool. So this is a huge responsibility on one hand, which takes me to the second principle, which is the focus on user centricity, right? So if you want to do it right, if you want to bring those added value proposals to the table, you really need to understand as much as possible to whom you are designing, because you can bring very pretty proposals to the table, but if at the end of the day they are not adding the real value to these specific users, it doesn't serve the purpose it should. So last but not least, I would mention innovation. That of course, innovation is a huge word, right? But innovation can take many forms, right? So if we take the example of our customers, freight forwarders, for example, we know that that they are used to work. They are used to use most classic communication channels to make their operations, right? We're talking about email, telephone, right? So how can you help them digitize themselves? I would say this happens through innovation, right? So you need to really bring an added value to these users so that they see the value in using it. So these would be the core principles I would like to share.
Awesome. And I think one of the things that I always have to remind myself about the subject as a whole is that what design means to, I think, a non-user experience person and what it means to a user experience person is very, very different. I think, at least initially, used to think of design as just what are the colors and what is the shape of the objects there. And it's really much more about crafting the full experience, the user experience that you were talking about. And of course, right, and of course, you never really just want to come in and try to make something look prettier, or just because you woke up in the morning and you're like, this looks ugly, I need to repaint my room, I need to rebuild the WebCargo platform. So let's get a little bit closer to the air cargo side. Can you walk us through some of the triggers that really justified this like massive months-long, if not more, effort to rebuild the platform?
Sure. So to answer this question, I'd like to give a little bit of context, right? So it's important to say that WebCargo was firstly built as a rate management system. So it was and it still is a very powerful and a very efficient tool for searching static rates and for quoting, right? So then when dynamic pricing and real-time capacity started to be a thing, what WebCargo did is that WebCargo adapted really fast And what it did in terms of product was that it started adding new e-booking features, right, on top of this solid e-booking tool. So the idea was to enable the users to take advantage of this new real-time capacity for them to be able to make new business as well. But the thing was that in terms of user experience, what we saw is that it wasn't working, right? So the direct and indirect feedback we were getting from our users was that they needed something different, right? So we saw that via their platform engagement as well. So it became unanimous internally that adding more features on top of those we had wasn't the approach. So we decided to take the bull by the horns and redesign the full e-booking platform from scratch.
Great. So really, just to recap that main shift, it's really the convergence of two different elements. The first is the industry is changing. We built something 10 years ago. We've improved on it, but there's a paradigm shift, and suddenly the industry has something dramatically different. And then also the way that the users are engaging as a result is also different. Right? And recognizing both of those. So I think that really brings us to I think the meat, which is you identify this change. You know that it's not necessarily about static rates, and we've definitely seen this during COVID this year, where static rates were basically ripped up and thrown out of the window. That the users are looking for a different experience, and I also feel this as us. Like when we're at home, we watch Netflix, we like check our emails on Gmail, and we've come to appreciate this B2C-like customer experience. I'm sure that's part of what users are really looking at. So on that cusp and on that need to change something, what are the actual steps? What's the actual process that you go through just in order to figure this out and to rebuild the platform from scratch?
Well, it was a big process, right? So if you take us to the next slide, so I can tell you where we started. So I should start by saying that I joined WebCargo a year and a half ago, and this was a completely new sector for me, and it actually still is. But the point is that the first thing we needed to do was to gather as much internal available information as possible, right? So this is what we started doing. I started having meetings with people from the internal teams, right, on the business side, on the product side, on the frontline teams, and not only that, it was the first time that we integrated a tool that allowed us to start observing users using our e-booking platform. So this started to enable us with more information of their real-time usage. So this was the first step that allowed us then to, and if you take us to the next screen, to start defining, okay, the types of users that we really needed to address with this new redesign, right? Because what we came to see was that we had at least 4 different profiles, right? So these examples that you can see here are pretty different. For example, we have the AirOps users, so they use our tool to book, not to quote. Then we have the sales and the pricing side of the business. They use they don't do bookings, but they are a super important part of the process because they are the ones that negotiate the rates. Then we have at least 2 mixed profiles, right? So the first one needs the full WebCargo functionality, and then the second one uses WebCargo with other tools. So they do bookings inside WebCargo, but they do the quoting outside. So it's very clear. It became very clear for us to understand that, okay, these users need to be addressed in a different way because they use the tool with different goals. So where they are looking for different information, they need to have a different experience. So we need to address them differently. So by the time we started to have these concepts in mind, what happened next, if you can take me to the next screen, what happened next was that management had a really great idea, which was to gather a cross-functional team and take us on an e-bookings retreat, where we spent 2 days sharing perspectives, sharing ideas, sharing all sorts of visions to what we wanted to bring into this new platform, right? So this was really, really gratifying, because we had the business side, the operations knowledge, the product vision, UX. We had R&D. So you can imagine the amount of inputs that came out of those 2 days. So after this, the next step was to transform those inputs, and if you can take me to the next screen, to transform all of these inputs into tasks, to filter everything and to transform everything into tasks, so that we can finally, at least on the UX side, so that we can finally understand how big this was, and we could project timeline and a detailed roadmap from where we were at that point until the MVP launch, right? With every single detailed week of every and each task that we needed to approach, right? So once we got that right and we understood the timeline we had and the detailed roadmap, if you can take me to the next screen.
And Christina, just at this point, you're up to the high level features that are required in order to make this happen? Or like where are you from a actual, what we end up seeing on the last screen at this point in the design process? You understand the user really well. I think the most important thing that you said there is that you understand the user's goals, not necessarily they're trying to search for a quote, but they're trying to service a customer and they want to provide them with the price as quickly as possible. Now, where are you right now with this detailed roadmap? I have features, or I have
I mean, I am specifically talking for of an UX roadmap. I understand that the product, of course, that we had an integrated roadmap with product, R&D, and UX. In terms of UX, this roadmap included all sorts of things. It included research, it included interviews with users, it included drafting wireframes, it included, of course, the analysis of these features and the proposals you would have to bring to the table, which is part of what we're going to see on the next slides. That's the beauty of it. It was huge, yeah. So once we got that project timeline right, what we did next was go back to research. So from market research, we analyzed our competitors as well, and I kept talking. I started organizing really well the conversations I wanted to have with the different teams, because there's a lot of knowledge internally, right? So I wanted to try to, as much as possible, understand the different visions of those who are on the front line with the customers, that were listening to their complaints every day, to what they wanted, to what they were requesting for a long time, etc. On the other hand, we started approaching users specifically with UX specific surveys, right? So by that time we selected a list of our top e-bookers, and we started sending them specific UX surveys, right? So not only that, we started gathering this information, gathering the data that our user observation through this new tool was also giving us. So some of the feedback that we started having was very much related to the way we were showing the results. We were having feedback from our customers that was saying, I don't know what's the best rate. It's hard for me to understand in all of this list, what should I select? What's the cheapest? What's the best for me? I need more details on the surcharges, for example. So we had all of these aspects in mind for the next steps. So then again, once we got this, so we were gathering this information from the users, and at the same time, and if you take me to the next slide, at the same time, we started analyzing ourselves, the tool itself, right? UX and the product team specifically started looking at it and looking into each specific page, each specific section, the components. Did they make sense? Were they well organized? Were the users using these components or not? If not, why did we have those? So what you can see there is all sorts of notes that we took, and by this time we started having a solid base of analysis and feedback that allows us to finally start bringing some hypotheses and some proposals into the table.
Amazing. And just to be clear, we must be at this point 50% through the process, 60% through the process from a timeline perspective. Where would you say we are?
40, 50, 40, 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the part that's most surprising for me, if I was building a platform tomorrow, I'd start with a wireframe or something. And here you haven't drawn anything yet. There's no features, yes. There's no UX there. It's just that you're still collecting the information and starting from them.
Absolutely, it's indispensable to do this part of the work first. I know sometimes it's not what it looks like. It's the bottom of the iceberg. But from my perspective, it makes all the difference when you bring the proposals into the table.
Amazing. Okay, so once you have all of this insight from how users are interacting, and I also, just to take a second to address, I've been watching this conversation that somebody's been having with somebody on our team about developing the product, and if you only follow user, Anika, I've been watching your chats with somebody on our team here in Zoom about when you develop a process and you only follow user experience, what ends up happening. And I think that the most important thing or one of the important things that Christina's mentioned so far when she was talking about the different roles of UX is that there's a certain component of innovation there. And at the end of the day, this is an intersect between a strong conviction that we have here at WebCargo about how the industry is changing, and then trying to wrap that within the user as well. And I think what Christina is really saying right now has said so far is that a huge component is understanding the user and then figuring out how that converges with the spark of innovation or that idea that we have and that we believe in very, very strongly. So moving on from there, Christina, once you have all those ideas, how do you continue and actually bring it to life?
So this is the time when we finally started drafting those wireframes you were talking about, right? And this was when the idea of the matrix started to gain life, right? So our idea was that we had an easy and smart data comparison, right? So it should be a multiple combination through the different axes that would be able to bring the users with multiple ways of seeing results, right? In a faster way and in a way that would help them take better decisions, right? So this was when we started drafting the first ideas, the first concepts, and what we try to do as soon as we could was sharing these first concepts with our users. So we started to have calls with some of our users, showing them, look, these are our ideas. This is how we are thinking of approaching the beginning of the process. This is how we are thinking of breaking these paradigms for the search and for the results. This is the content and so on. So that we could validate that we were going the right way or not, right? So then the next steps from here, if you can take me to the next slide. So the next steps from here, once we started having these these validations from the customers, and and we did receive very good feedback from the beginning, was that okay, so let's dive deep. So we started reorganizing everything. So we started reorganizing the menu, the information hierarchy coming from the top. We started closing these end-to-end flows for each and every one of these personas we talked about at the beginning, right? And from there, if you can take me to the next screen. From there, so once we were at this point, we had another 2 days workshop. This time at the office. So some of the people you can see here were all participants on this project. This was, of course, never a one solo work thing. So this was built with the effort of a lot of team members. So what we did here was that we explored as much as we could the results page hypothesis that we could provide to the users. Were we just bringing one vista for the matrix view, or were we combining different views that could provide the users different way of matching results? Because sometimes our users were saying that, okay, for me, the most interesting view is seeing the airline against the departure date, or some others were telling us, no, it is the departure date against the arrival time. So what we did was we explored all these possibilities and how we were going to show them inside these little cards, right? Because you have to show the itinerary, you have to show the times, you have to show a huge amount of information in the best way possible. So were we even providing any other view, a classic view, to these users that are more used to this classic way of showing content? So these 2 days were very intense, but the feeling that we ended up with, I guess everyone, was that, okay, this is it. We're going to bring something new. So it was, again, very gratifying and a very important part of the process. So from here, if you could take me to the next step, this is the moment where we finally started bringing the color, like you mentioned before. Okay, let's put the color and paint and all that. No, so what we started doing here was, okay, having this internal validation from users and from the team. We started bringing to life the high fidelity mockups. So for those who may not be so familiar with the term, so we started doing the pixel perfect pages for each and every sort of interaction, right? So as you can see here, there's a red square over there that says 180 screens. So it can give you an idea of how many sections, use cases, and every single interaction that we thought about when we built this, and it was great, and so this was it. So by this time we started putting everything into place. Okay, so the right components with the right colors, with the right fonts, with the right margins, but there were challenges along the way. So it's some of them would be, for example, if I tell you that we needed to bring this project to life with a new design system. For example, we were adopting some new components, so we had to design with all of this in mind. So this was a very important part of the process. And not only that, but the team was implementing this project with a new coding method as well. So this was a huge team effort. So this was the time when we kept aligned with product, with R&D, and with QA to make sure that everything got implemented in the right way.
Cool. And just to put another layer of complexity on top of this, we're talking about the design aspects here, but of course there's this entire back end on the product side, and we started off by saying this is the convergence of both the user experience, but also this external change in the industry. And in many cases, we're using APIs, for example, or connectivity with airlines in ways that nobody else was doing, which means that you can build the design and you can start building the API, and then when you start to execute it, suddenly you realize that there's some airlines that just aren't set to handle a certain number of queries, and it just adds this entire other layer of wrenches that can get thrown into the socket or the axle while you're trying to drive this. But we're going to gloss over that because no one really wants to hear about the problems on the webinar.
I think not.
Let's dive into the happy stuff, which is what were the results and what did the win look like from your perspective?
Okay, in terms of the results, I guess we could spend here at least 1 hour more talking about all the differences that came with this new project. But if you take me to the next slide, I just chose the two main slides, I would say, because these would be the first two pages that you have contact with if you're searching for a rate and you want to book a shipment, right? So here you have the comparison between the before and after, right? So you have the new homepage here where you would have to input all the data to make a search for a rate. It's nice to talk about this goods type section here with the new component for the commodity. It looks like a simple component, but it actually enables the users to search for commodities in a totally new way. It has a lot of functionality behind it, right? And then the second screenshot I would show would be the next, which is the page that you would see next, right? So the default results page that you would see. And so I guess it's easier to compare the new version with the previous one. So this is how these two pages look like. The first two pages you have contact with if you have a contact with our tool. But I would like to show, but I'd rather speak about the other type of results that we got, right? So I would go to the next slide to just show the graphic you showed at the beginning, right? So the good thing is that what we saw when we launched the Matrix was an exponential growth. So what happened is that we consecutively hit our e-bookings record. We ended up with a patented project by the European Community of Design. So the percentage of customer complaints dropped abruptly. So the right words, the exact words from the team were like, okay, there's a before and there's an after this new e-bookings launch, which made me really happy. So, and from our customers, we understand that we have a higher customer retention. We have been having great feedback, and most of all, I guess that everyone is highly motivated to keep working on enhancements, and we are already doing it, and keep pushing for making this tool even better.
That's incredible, and thank you for that, Christine. And I think one of the things that I remember the most while we were gearing up towards launching this was the amount of time we spent kind of afraid that all of the users would log in one day and would be so disoriented, which is one of those challenges that you hit when you first realize that you're changing the interface, you're changing the way that a customer works. And I remember we all kind of came in that day and nothing really happened, right? It was just everybody was very okay with it.
Yes. We felt that was actually almost no friction on the product adoption, which was kind of amazing. So I would like to take the opportunity to once again say that this was a huge effort coming from a lot of people from different teams. So I guess, and they are excellent professionals and excellent teammates. So that would be it from me.
Thank you, and thank you so much for that, Christina. I did want
Thank
to
you.
touch, from my perspective, on some of the most important things. And I was kind of writing this down while I was discussing this with Christina before the webinar, about what I think is really relevant. And I was definitely thinking about this from the marketing and Freightos's marketing and WebCargo's marketing in general, but also some of the things that really emerged here. I think one of the most important things is that it needs to start, anything you do really needs to start with an idea. It really needs to start with conviction. For us, the biggest idea behind this was that the way that people procure air cargo is changing. And we saw little peaks of this coming up from airlines and from freight forwarders and even from shippers talking about it. But starting with that layer of conviction that you want to work on something is very important. If you're interested in a little bit more about that conviction, you can go to digitalaircargo.com. There's a very brief video that really walks through what the kernel of the idea is from the WebCargo perspective. The second thing, and this almost balances for the conviction, is a certain sense of humility, where you don't necessarily know exactly what's going to work. And this is an error that on the marketing side we make constantly, where we'll come up with an idea and we'll just wake up in the morning and we will believe in it so much, and we'll get out there and we'll launch this webinar or a white paper or an advertising campaign, and it just flops miserably. And I think that that's a indicative of lacking the humility to actually check and figuring out, this is a new idea, this is something that's different. How can I actually make it sync up with the reality of the user that you're engaging with? And again, I'm going to quote Anika, who I'm really enjoying the chats from that I've seen, who talked about not always creating things around the need. Steve Jobs creating an iPad without anybody ever waking up and saying, hey, I need a tablet. And I think that's exactly it. It's that Steve had that conviction of an idea. For the record, I hated tablets when they first came out, but now I use one all the time. And he took that and converged that together with a ton of user experience research that Apple does every single time, in order to make sure that it's something that, even if you come up with this new idea, it's something that will land correctly. And I thought that was really interesting. Another thing, and of course, making sure that it lands correctly by doing a ton of data-driven research, whether it's qualitative interviews or data feedback from the way that people are engaging with actual content. The last thing is patience. That even once WebCargo had this idea and had the general wireframe, making sure that it was perfect and making sure that it was stress tested and making sure that every single person was aligned, even if it meant delaying by a month or a month and a half. And internally, it drove every single person nuts that things were getting a little bit more delayed. But the patience to make sure that you can only launch it once. And when you're providing a new experience for somebody, the first time they touch it is going to be such a shaper of the way that they forever engage with it. One of the reasons I hated tablets for so long was that when I first started using a tablet, it wasn't an Apple. I picked up an Android tablet, and I've always been a big Google guy, but their tablets were just trash. And I hated tablets for so long because my first interaction with it was really, really, really bad. And it is very, very difficult to recover from a bad first impression. I would be remiss if I didn't use this as a very quick opportunity to say that WebCargo is awesome. If you're on the air cargo side, then definitely head to webcargo.co and ask for a free trial or free access to WebCargo. This is really the best way to access the largest number of airlines, real-time pricing, real-time capacity from all of them online in seconds. And not only does it help logistics providers work better and help airlines provide better offerings, but it helps the end shipper because they get the goods they need and the pricing they need at the right time. And during such volatile times, that really is so critical. I really want to thank everybody for coming to this webinar. I think that this is a relatively new idea. We don't talk as often as I think we should about the processes that happen internally. We saw a number of competitors sign up for this webinar and debated for a while what to do about it. And I think, as Christina talked about, we run competitive analysis, and we're glad that our competitors do too, because at the end of the day, we feel like this always moves the industry a little bit closer and creates a little bit of a better experience across the board, and also helps educate the users and helps kind of bring them over to this new general way of thinking around air cargo. So Christina, I just want to thank you once more again for taking the time, congratulate you on an awesome job done with this. It really speaks for itself, and certainly the chart does. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much, Ethan. Thank you.
And thank you everybody for tuning in. A video of this webinar will be available live. If you'd like to consume or try out any of the other videos, articles about how we see air cargo or freight in general advancing, please head over to webcargo.co or freightos.com. Thank you very much and have a great day.